Colin Deaver works for KTSM-TV in El Paso. Started looking around a couple of days ago for information, those who would be interested in discussing the story involving what has happened at New Mexico State and obviously the cancellation of their last 6 games, forfeiting their last 6 games of the men's basketball season. Colin joins us, Craig, Paul, David Smoak on 365 Sports. Colin, what is the next step? They've canceled the games. Where is the coaching staff, and how is that tenuous with their jobs?
Well, right now they're on paid administrative leave. The assumption by myself and I think basically everybody is that that's not going to last for much longer and that they're all going to be fired. However, at 2:45 Mountain Time here on Tuesday, we're still kind of waiting to see what's going to happen in that regard. I've heard rumblings of a press conference later today to maybe do that. There's a Board of Regents meeting, closed Board of Regents meeting at 5 p.m. today to potentially discuss that. I don't know for a fact that that's what they're talking about, but I would imagine that that's what they're talking about since they only just scheduled the meeting on Saturday. So really, it's all kind of still on the table. I think the majority of us kind of have a pretty good feeling of where this is going, but given how they've handled a lot of these things, since dating back as far as the shooting in November up in Albuquerque, I think you just, until something is concrete in front of me that it's happening, I don't want to say for sure what is going to happen because it's just been a roller coaster with this team since November.
Outside of the coaching staff, does the athletic director have to feel uncomfortable here because he's the one who brought these guys in? And have you felt since November that this is a ticking clock even before you heard about the hazing incident?
I always thought after the shooting in November that there should have been more of a push to potentially move on from Greg Heier, maybe even cancel the season then. I mean, it was really toxic. Then obviously you have a active player on your team the night before your biggest rivalry game, kill a student that's a member goes to your rival school. The details of that case are that the men's basketball player that did that acted in self-defense, but the point stands. I mean, that's a dark day for your program. He was out after curfew with a gun on a road trip. So I thought that even then they had grounds to maybe make some moves. And this is even worse, right? I mean, it adds to the stain of the program that's been put on it by Greg Heier and his staff since 11 months ago when they got hired to take over for Chris Jans. People I've spoken with seem to think that the athletic director, Mario Moccia, might be safe, but you never know. I mean, this is a toxic thing, right? I mean, it's terrible. It's things you never hear about, you never want to hear about anywhere in college athletics as well. So I couldn't say for certain that he's completely safe, but right now, that's kind of what I'm hearing is that most people think that the athletic director is going to be around still.
Colin, you referenced the alleged self-defense shooting from a player that got this ball rolling, and we talked about this a bit yesterday. Like, you can see the CCTV footage for the morbidly curious and all of that, and there's a lot that's been written about that. But what about this latest chapter that got us to where we are here, the hazing, whatever else may be going on as far as you know, what knowledge you have? The shooting kind of set this all off, but how did we get to this point where now they're throwing their hands up and going, okay, we got to put a stop to this for the time being?
Well, while the team and the police and whoever, they're investigating the shooting and potential involvement of some other players, potentially hiding evidence after the shooting. After all of that happens, you would think that while that is happening, they would be operating under the most squeaky clean of circumstances. And apparently this entire time, dating back to last July or August, according to a police report that we received on Sunday, 3 players of the New Mexico State men's basketball team have basically been sexually assaulting a teammate of theirs in the locker room. The police report details that multiple times they would pin him down in the locker room, remove his pants, they would slap his butt, they would touch his genitals. And this, again, happened in the locker room and on road trips frequently, according to the police report, in front of the entire team, and no one ever intervened. So that's kind of the culture that had been fostered this year, where this was allowed to go on, and that's what led ultimately to the cancellation shutdown of the program. The chancellor had some very strong words to say in a statement on Sunday saying, quote, "It was time for a program reset." So I think that gives you every indication, even though they have not made that move yet. I mean, if the chancellor is coming out saying it's a time for a program reset, to me that says it all without actually making the move.
How much is the coaching staff in trouble for the hazing incident because they knew about the hazing, didn't say anything, or is this ignorance on their part and they did know about it, which means they're not involved enough in their own locker room?
I don't know. I just don't know that enough to say for certain. I've heard different things regarding that, right? I've heard that they may have known and didn't do anything. I've heard that they didn't know. So I don't want to say for certain and, convict them in the court of public opinion either way on that. But regardless, I mean, this is happening in your program all the while there's an investigation into a deadly shooting involving one of your players. So if you didn't know, in my opinion, you should have known, because you're the head coach, you're the assistant coach, whoever you are in that program, you're in charge of these kids 18 to 22 years old to make sure they're doing the right thing. And that's why you get paid. Greg Heier gets paid $300,000 a year in the grand scheme of college athletics. That's not a lot, but for the normal person, $300,000 is a lot. And he's getting paid that much money to oversee this team. And from what it seems like, from all the events, from all the incidents they've had, it seems like that wasn't happening.
Colin, the hiding of evidence, of course, is, it's not sometimes the crime, it's the cover-up. And sometimes, of course, it needs to be both. But when they canceled the season, was there wait a minute, what about all the other players who aren't involved? But you just mentioned that everybody allegedly saw everything. So there was nobody stepped up, or you think it's because they had fear of retribution?
Yeah, you'd have to think maybe that's the case. And there's also a line in the police report that there was potentially another player that was subjected to this treatment. So, yeah, it's hard to say. I think at this point how deep it runs. We've been doing our best to get to the bottom of it. I think that's going to take weeks, months, maybe years before we really know how deep this went within that program. But certainly it's not a good look for the victim in this case to say I was being assaulted in the locker room by three of my teammates frequently in front of other people. And I don't know. I mean, if this were happening to me or my son or my daughter, I would hope that somebody would have stepped up to stop it. And from what we know right now, that didn't happen. And that's, again, just an indictment on the entire culture of the program.
Was there any kind of, at least, wait a minute, what are they doing back when the head coach was hired because of his connections to LSU?
It's funny that you mentioned that. I did ask that question when he was hired 11 months ago. He was, again, like you said, on staff with Will Wade at LSU. Heier was on staff at Wichita State with Greg Marshall. At one point in time, he was at Southern Miss with Larry Eustace. So he has worked for some people who don't necessarily have the best reputation in college athletics. However, he has always kind of skated on that. There's never been, a public incident involving him that's come out that would maybe rule him out for being hired. So anyways, I asked him about that 11 months ago. And he said that, quote, "You're guilty by association," and to judge him on who he is now and how he operates his program moving forward. And here we are 11 months later. And I think it's safe to say we can make our own judgments about his program right now.
Well, Colin, you were right to ask that question, because that's like getting a resume saying, look, I worked for, Bernie Madoff, and I worked for Enron, and I also, worked, I don't know, I can't think of another one, but I work for these three companies. But look, I'm not a bad guy. I'm that all the stuff they did was I was just a guy working. That to me kind of seems silly, especially since you see what's happened on the back end of this.
Sure, yeah. I mean, it's been stunning to say the least. everything that has allegedly gone on within this program. I can't remember if I've ever heard of something like this, like a hazing event. I hesitate to even call it a hazing event because it seems so much more serious than that. I can't remember something like this happening at the college level. I've heard of it at the high school level, but I don't think I've ever heard of something like this at the college level.
Yeah, it's interesting, huh? I bet you get a ding or a text or whatever, a phone call, and it's probably, oh my God, what's the next thing? But it seemed like a lot of it is at least out there. Now the question is, what are the repercussions or consequences, maybe the better word, going forward? I hate for the young men that had the season shut down that perhaps weren't involved, or at least weren't involved in anything negative. I did see it. I think it was Colin, your timeline, that one of the best players to commit to New Mexico State men's basketball is asking for a scholarship release.
Yeah, 4-star recruit, Lowell Darius Carr. He signed with it's not. It's one thing to commit. He actually signed his letter of intent last November with New Mexico State as the second highest rated recruit in program history. 4-star recruit, consensus with ESPN rivals, 247, all of them. And today we actually interviewed him. My coworker Sam Guzman interviewed him a short time ago, and he's backing out. He wants to be granted his release from the program. I can't imagine that the school will fight him on it too hard to get his release. I will say that he also told us that he does still have some interest in going to New Mexico State. So, maybe if they bring in a coach that he likes, and the coach whoever they bring in, if they do go that route, will have to, be someone with a fairly clean reputation. You'd have to think. You can't just continue going this route of hiring guys with, some questionable backgrounds. It's going to have to be someone with a clean reputation again, if they decide to go that route. But yeah, that's where it stands. The second best recruit in program history decommitting because of all this.
Wow. We saw what happened when Baylor had their deal when Art Browse was fired, and they had one of maybe their highest rated class ever shredded within days after that. So that's just the tip of the iceberg. And obviously in basketball, not nearly as many players have signed or committed or already signed there, as you mentioned, letter of intent. Thanks for your time, Colin. Good luck. You're doing a hell of a job, by the way. You really are. You've got all the boxes checked. You're doing a hell of a job with not just the story, but the surrounding stories, and good luck with it going forward.
I appreciate that, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Colin Deaver, KTSM Television in El Paso.
Yeah.